Hello and welcome to Autistic FM. My name is Haje. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm your host on this journey. You can subscribe to Autistic FM wherever you get your podcasts, and it would be awesome if you did. That's how we grow and thrive. Over on our website at autistic.fm, you can find episode transcripts and additional information. We also have discussion threads for each episode, a Neurospicy forum, and much more. And all of that is free. If you become a supporter for as little as $5 a month, you'll get a sneak peek at upcoming topics, the chance to submit guest questions, and add ideas to our wish list, join a supporters-only discussion group, and much more. We've got a bunch of additional exclusive treats coming soon, so stay tuned. In this episode, I'm joined by Nick, one of the co-hosts of the On the Spectrum podcast. Rather than sticking to some sort of a set plan, we just let the conversation unfold naturally, and it took us to some really meaningful places. What followed was an honest and sometimes messy conversation about identity, diagnoses, burnout, masking, and the quiet pressures of being neurodivergent in a world that isn't built for us. We explored how it feels to mask around others, the tug of war between visibility and safety, and how often we question whether we're doing life the right way. It was a really vulnerable conversation, and I absolutely loved it. I do have a quick content warning. This episode includes discussions about autism, mental health, masking, self-doubt, and a bunch of other sensitive experiences. Please do listen with care and at your own pace. With all of that said, let's roll the tape. Hello and welcome back to Autistic FM. I am joined by a really exciting guest in my very first crossover episode. My really exciting guest, would you share your name and your pronouns, please?
So I'm Nick.
Yep.
I will take he, him for today. I am the co-host of On the Spectrum podcast.
Which I am a huge fan of. I can't say
Thank
I've
you.
listened to every episode because there's a lot of them. You guys have been at this for a while, but I love it. And so I get the joy of having Nick today. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a podcaster in general. But I suspect, given our little preamble, we've sat here for like 15 minutes and I've been laughing my ass off. This has been great. So let's figure out where we go. I have a couple of standard questions that I ask people. I'd love to start with the first one. And I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is your relationship with neurodivergence?
My good God. It's actually a really good question because I have experienced from a very, very young age, and I don't mean just because, born that way, because I didn't know until I was in my mid to late 30s. Steve didn't know until his early 30s. But my parents used to run a group home, and back, late 70s and the 80s, it was just considered a behavioral home, right? A lot of those people in that house had to have been neurodivergent of some type, but we didn't have that language, right? Back in the 80s, people didn't get diagnosed with autism unless they were really high support need autistic, right? There wasn't really low support need. They had a different name. And even under that other name, they didn't quite match up. There were still some people who kind of didn't quite match that criteria, but my parents were in group homes with that, and they were all involved in, special needs communities, right? So I've known about a lot of it for a really long time in that regard. So I know the vocabulary changes that have come over the years and the conceptual changes, because at one point they looked at the behavior from only an outside observer standpoint, and now they're starting to look at the behavior from an internal our perspective, if you will, which is a cool shift, which I think it needs to have both, because a human being is not great at evaluating their own, right? They're how they convey. So I think it kind of needs to be both, but we can get into that more later. And I have a son who at the age of 2-3 got diagnosed with autism. And then that's when I really started to learn about it quite a bit, and I started to get into it when he got diagnosed, and he's now about to be 19 next month. Which I'm like, oh my God, I have an adult. So anyway, when he got diagnosed, my mother, who'd been working with kids with special needs and kids with disabilities, she came home one day and said, "I met you." And I said, "Yes, 32 years ago."
Yeah.
And she goes,
You probably remember it better than I did.
Yeah, like, I wasn't there, Mom, but we met.
Yeah.
She was like, "No, I met you today. I met excuse the language. I don't know what your preference in language is, but I'm going to say it the way my mom at that time said it. I met a high functioning autistic person with bipolar who I swear to God is you." And I went, "Cool." And then I went to my therapist at the time and said, my mom thinks I might have the tism. Now, what I said at the time, I called it something different, but I'm going to go with that for the nowadays translation. And he said, you know, I actually did most of my residency and I did a lot of my doctoral thesis on autism. And he said, I didn't want to bring it up because you seem to be just fine coping in society on your own. And I went, so you think I'm autistic? And he goes, well, because this is right as the DSM changed.
It's like that, well, but maybe we should get evaluated kind of thing.
Yeah, and I didn't end up getting evaluated for many years after that because I, like most people, were like, you know what, they can't do anything about it and there's no services you can get as an adult, so what's the point? And actually, I'll say this as my first, soapbox statement. The point is because it'll help you. It doesn't matter what anybody else does for you, it helps you. Because yes, it's another label you put on yourself, but it's a label that makes sense. And you can actually take a lot of solace in the fact knowing, oh, so me twitching out and having a meltdown is not my fault. It's a response to, which is great to allow yourself that level of grace and forgiveness. And I've been bringing it up on the podcast a lot about how folks who are neurodivergent or anybody who has a mental difference of any type needs to give themselves more grace. It's okay to have a bad day. You're allowed to. It is your day.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I love that.
That's soapbox number one.
Well, you just mentioned the previous diagnostic term, which we shall not name. You didn't, but we shall still not name it.
Yeah. So I have no problem with the name because I know there are people in the community who still call themselves that, and as a community of their own, but that's how they grew up, But anyway,
where this gets klutzy for me is when we're talking about historical stuff.
Sure.
Like you may have noticed me mention the previous diagnostic term. What I mean here is Asperger's syndrome. It's a diagnosis that used to be part of the official diagnostic manuals, but isn't anymore. It was named after Hans Asperger, who, as it later came to light, was a raging prick. He was involved with Nazi-era eugenics programs, a deeply troubling legacy that led many autistic people to distance themselves from the term. That said, a lot of folks were originally diagnosed with Asperger's back when that was a standard label, and that can be a weird thing to navigate. Like when your diagnosis changes names, it can feel like somebody's rewriting your story without asking. And so some people still identify with the term because it helped them understand themselves. And that's totally valid too. Language evolves, labels evolve, and our lived experience is still what really, really matters. The first time I discovered about this, I was like, hey, Mom, I read about this thing called Asperger's. I think this might be applicable to me, right?
Right.
And I've definitely had people say to me, it's like, you can't say that. I was like, well, that's what I said at the time. This is me talking about me at age 14. I didn't have the word anything else. Like, that's what I had. And so I think, like, I do understand, and I understand that it's very heavily loaded with historical challenges and that Asperger was a raging asshole and that maybe don't give him more of a spotlight. And there is this really interesting quirk about that diagnosis that I think is important to highlight in the context of this, which is the people who were diagnosed with Asperger's were done so because they were seen as useful to the Germans, right? So if you are not useful, then you don't get that diagnosis, and then you're basically useless. And I think there's a piece in here where it is like you desperately need to be diagnosed with something to understand yourself, but because you're not it's like that thing you were talking about, the external thing, right? Like externally, you're too loud and you're not useless, so we just get rid of you, versus, hey, maybe you need some support. Kind of thing.
Yeah, you got to also think about in that time period, not just, fascist regime, but also in that time period, they looked at people for their usefulness in general, right? Like, think of gender roles. Her role is useful in the kitchen and raising children. His is to be productive in the factory. It was a common theme among all people to think about how do you not just fit into society, but how does society benefit from you? That doctor took it one step further, right? He just immediately was like, called it out. You know what? You're worth living because I can put you to do math. You know what I mean? Like,
you can calculate rocket trajectories. We'll keep you around.
Yes. Yeah.
And the thing that I find really scary
Yeah.
right now is that we're starting
Mhm.
to see echoes of that in the current discourse.
Yeah.
RFK, a
Yeah.
bunch of people who are like of that ilk, who are like, well, they'll never play basketball. We're not screening people for whether or not they can play basketball or hold down jobs. We're screening
Right.
people for whether or not they are human, and that's a really easy test. Let's not be assholes about this.
Yeah. Some of his comments are way more offensive to some people than to me. And one
Right.
of the reasons why is because he is one asshole talking, right? And
Fair.
I know I've said some ignorant shit in my life because we all have. And it depends on who we're around, who we're surrounded by, and where we're getting that information, right?
Nick briefly mentions RFK here. That's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is currently Trump's Secretary of the US Department of Health and Human Services. He has been a polarizing figure, to say the least, especially in discussions around health and vaccines. In autistic communities, he's particularly problematic because he's promoted the long debunked and scientifically discredited claim that vaccines cause autism. I should highlight that that supposed link is completely spurious, with no credible evidence to support it, and it's been repeatedly discredited by researchers worldwide. Misinformation like this has fueled stigma and harmed autistic people for decades. You don't have to dive deep into the background for this episode, but I just wanted to give you the context and why the mention of RFK matters in this context. Right, but Nick, you seem like a lovely guy. It wouldn't make you the Minister of Health.
Oh, yeah, don't do that. No, I would immediately feed people Twinkie. No, and I agree with that. By the way, I agree with the assessment that he should not be in charge of like a health department of any type. He was a lawyer. He was an environmental lawyer. And you know what? He was good at it. And like, if he wants to talk about climate change, I'm going to listen because the dude was involved in that world for a really long time. And he was a really smart lawyer. And like, I give, respect and credit where credit is due. The second he opened his mouth about anything outside of environmental sciences, being a human being, and like, I don't know, marriage, I don't know how many he's had, maybe only one. I might listen to him about relationships at that point. But outside of that, I don't want him to tell me what essential oil to take to cure my gray. Like, no thanks.
There's a thing that happens a lot when very smart people kind of get a platform and then they talk about all the other stuff. Like a really good example is Richard Dawkins. His book, The Selfish Gene, was incredibly influential. I love reading it. And that's about evolutionary biology. When he starts spouting bullshit about other stuff, I'm like, friend, like, I'm not going to tell people to stay in their lane because I never do. But also, I'm not the same. Like, I've written 20 books about photography. I'm legitimately one of the world's foremost experts on photography. That doesn't make me good at anything else, right? And I think sometimes people fall into this Dunning-Kruger syndrome part of like, I know everything about everything. It's like, that is not true, friend.
I say it this way, like the reason why I open the show with we do not presume to be experts of anything is because me and Steve are well read in certain subjects, but we know full well that no matter how much we've read in even that subject, there's still way more to learn in that subject. Like I got accused the other day on YouTube. I got accused of believing that I'm an expert in psychology, but I only have a bachelor's degree in it. I start the show with, I do not presume to be an expert of anything. I have a lot of reading in it because that's my obsession. My obsession is trying to figure out originally how to fit in with the rest of these people. And now it's more about figuring out and seeing those differences in a good perspective or a better perspective than I had. I used to use it functionally to try to figure out how to, and using our modern terms, mask appropriately. Now I use it as a matter of like understanding, and actually it's allowed me to read research in a different way, which is weird because like I knew how to read it to begin with, which people need a crash course in that regularly. The side tangent on that one, but it's allowed me to also see it a little bit more for a little bit more of the specifics for the demographic data they use. So I used to read research in the sense of, well, they've already made sure it's random. They already made sure they selected appropriately. It's already able to be generalized out to the mass populace. Now I'm reading it for what it's really saying. You have a crap ton more hetero white guys in that study. Cool. So hetero white guys are more likely to X. That doesn't mean they always will, but more likely. That's one of the things that, like, especially right now about autism, when people talk about research, I hate that they see more likely to, and they immediately go, we will. Like all of the hidden traits of autism. No, like most of those are things people do. A lot of
And humans are infinitely complex, right? So the
yes,
gold standard of science is, of course, the double-blind randomized controlled
yep,
trial. Well, you can't really do that with a lot of psychology because it turns out
no,
if you find 10 autistic people, that is not a random control size. They've already been identified as autistic.
yeah,
There's so many reasons why by the time you get to them, it's no longer to the highest, from a selection point of view, it's no longer scientifically the highest grade science you
right,
can do. And that's okay. That's the other thing you have to say. In
yeah,
psychology and psychiatry, it's like it's not an exact science and it probably
right,
never will be. Although I had a hilarious interaction with a psychiatric nurse the other day who
uh-huh,
I was like, hey, I want some help with, like, I've just been diagnosed with ADHD and autism and I need some help. And she was like, oh, how were you diagnosed? I was like, interesting. I filled in all this form. My sister filled in all these forms. I did 2.5 hours on Zoom. She's like,
mhm.
oh, you have to do it in person and you have to get a brain scan. I was like, I have to get a what now? And this person was clearly not entirely on the pulse, but also just rude. And I
Yeah,
was
well,
like, this is interesting. It's been a minute since I've ran across somebody this ignorant and I'm paying you. What the fuck? That was an interesting moment.
yeah. So here's my question about diagnostic, especially when it comes to autism. So we
Yeah.
know full well, or at least there's good, strong evidence to support that the structure of our brains through an MRI can be seen different than others.
Mhm.
So why don't we do that to diagnosis then? I mean, long term, that'd be way better than the process they do now, and it's far more accurate, if you will. I mean, I'm not saying it's like infinitely better, but like we know full well based on some studies that they can actually see certain parts of the brain that are more likely going to be autistic brain. It's going to be denser in some spots and less dense in others. So why
Yeah.
don't we use that as diagnostics? Why are we still having conversations to diagnose?
I have an answer for that if you're curious.
No, because I'm pretty sure it's going to come down to somebody getting paid.
Well, there is that, but the other thing is ASD is a spectrum, right? I don't think there is an autistic brain. It's like they're all different neurodivergences, and somebody who's like really high on sensitivity will be different on logical reasoning, will be different on,
Well,
and I think
sure.
you might be able to identify one specific subset of autism, but then
Uh-huh.
all the other ASDs and other neurodivergences wouldn't show up in the same way. Saying that some of it is like you can do genetic tests that
Uh-huh.
finds a 20% chance of whether or not this person is autistic. But then there's
Yeah.
all the other stuff that comes with it.
Well, I mean, one study I read, and I don't know how definitive that this study is, right? So there's this one study I read, okay, said
Mhm.
that based on the participants of the study, okay, that it was like an 80 something percent ability to figure out if the person was ASD, not what
Mhm.
difficulties or issues that they're having or whatnot in their lives, but just be able to identify just purely by shape, right?
I just want to jump in with a quick acronym check here. ASD stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder. It's a diagnosis that includes a wide range of characteristics, anything from sensory sensitivities to communication styles. Everybody who is diagnosed with ASD experiences it pretty differently. And that's kind of part of the point, right? It's called spectrum disorder because there's a spectrum. Anyway, let's get back to the podcast.
And specifically
Right.
the density of like the gray and white matter, right? And I thought, well, then why don't we just use that? Because no matter what you do in any level of diagnostics, you're always going to miss some people, or you're going to misattribute somebody with something. You're going to completely tell somebody there's nothing going on with them, and they clearly actually have sensory issues that might be attributed to neurodivergence, right? You're always going to miss somebody, and that sucks. But again, it's humans doing it. So, of course, there's going to be some flaw to it. I just really think that we need to start using what we know. And I understand the way you were just saying it, because the whole like pie chart thing and the differences and all that. And that's cool. The thing about it, though, is if we can look at somebody's brain and go within this range, we're getting like 90% of the autistic community diagnosed better than,
Yeah.
just having a conversation with somebody who's got some biases or some shit. I think that'd be a
Right.
much better way to go about doing it. But then again, I like things that are a little bit more definitive.
Right.
Let's not forget, everybody, I said I'm super into psychology. I got a lot of faith in psychology, and I'm the one telling somebody you feel that light is too bright sometimes is not the best way for that person to assess you. And on that, they might diminish what you're saying because they hear it through their ear, which means their past, their perspective, their perception of the world. And so you might say some shit and they're going to hear it as, yeah, people go through that, when they themselves might be sitting there as an ND and not know it. Right? And they've never questioned it because whatever reason. So they're just like, no, people do that. Not realizing that most people don't.
And that's on the receiving end. On the transmitting end, I might downplay this, right? My entire life, I've been bothered by noises, and I've been trying to mask the hell out of that and train myself to ignore it, and train myself that, it's really hard to be in a loud bar when there's 3 TVs blaring and the cash register and there's a ping ball machine and there's 15 conversations happening, and I'm trying to pay attention to 3 people's body language. I'm exhausted within 45 minutes, right? I just mask the shit out of that, usually by drinking too much alcohol. That is not necessarily the smartest way of going about it, but that is me masking. And so if a doctor asks you, like, do you have trouble with noise? I was like, how do I answer that? My entire life, I'm trying to not do the thing that I'm about to tell you. There's a really interesting piece. About 15 years ago, Radiolab did an episode called How to Cure What Ails You, which was all about, I see we're both drinking like prodigious amounts of coffee. This is hilarious.
Wait, I thought that was the cure for autism.
I mean, it's the cure for something.
Yeah, it
Cheers. It's us potentially self-medicating ADHD is what's happening here.
Yes, straight up. I have told people with ADHD for years, if you don't have insurance, strong cups of coffee there, because it might only work this much, but that's way better than what wasn't working before.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
anyway, sorry.
NPR's Radiolab in 2010, I think, did an episode called How to Cure What Ails You, which basically talks about the promising developments in functional MRI in doing brain scans of, in this case, depressed people, and that they could definitively say whether somebody was depressed based on the brain scan. 15 years later, right? That was 15 years ago. They still don't really have a good way of doing that. I feel like that technology is still pretty far away from being like, yes, definitely this or this. It's like, yes.
So I would actually say, I think that's one of the issues that our community has. Okay. It's all or nothing thinking. That's kind of where it's derived, but it's that idea of,
how dare you, sir?
Yeah. Like we all have, I mean, that's a humanistic thing, is to have a cognitive distortion of all or nothing thinking, right? Ours just happens to be a little bit magnified, but everything we do is a little bit magnified, right? How much we feel, how much empathy we have, how much energy we have at times, how depressed we get. Everything about our folk is magnified, right? How much we love something, how passionately we are about it. Like, it's magnified in us. But getting back to where I was, it's the idea about definitive, right? It needs to be 100% accurate. No, it doesn't need to be 100%. 99% is good enough.
Right.
I say, if we can come up with a diagnostic way outside of, the perception and the, frailty of humans, if we can come up with a way that's like 60% accurate, I'll take that over the process we have now. Because the process we have now, you could put every DSM diagnosis on a board and throw a dart, and you're probably hitting the same percentage of accuracy, right? And I think that's really bad. And again, big fan of psychology. I love diagnostic criteria. I'm a huge fan of counseling. I was a counselor for a little while. But the accuracy of diagnosing somebody is as good as a dartboard. I think if we can find something that's like 55% accuracy rating, well, that's better than majority. Let's go. I'll take that. So when I talk about like MRI studies and stuff, one of the things that I found most promising about that is because we can do it faster. And not just faster, we can give somebody a lot more clarity and hope to find a direction to feel good about and get some validation from, opposed to the process we have. A therapist goes, I think you might, and then you run off and start looking at stuff, but you don't have a good, clear direction because there's so many bullshitters in our community. Oh my God. there are so many a-holes that I'm like, you shouldn't be talking about research because you didn't even say the beginning of that correctly. You just randomly spouted off some shit out of it, and you didn't even frame it right. There's even a clinical researcher, and I'm not going to say what their name is or what their handle on the social media is. I hate everything this person has said in every video that has popped up on one of the services, because everything they say is only through a social justice lens. And I don't mean overall social justice lens. I mean literally they pick it apart from a singular social justice lens, and then they say shit about the entire autism community. And I'm like, bring it to where you're talking about, and we can talk the research of that or whatever information there is in the world about it. But no, because all of the research you're quoting has nothing to do with that lens. And yet you're so I don't dig that.
People have incredibly powerful confirmation biases, right? If that's the lens you want to look through, that's what you'll find. I had a conversation with somebody the other day who was like, people who have not been diagnosed should not talk for the autism community. I was like, I have an amendment. Nobody should talk for the autism community, including people who've been diagnosed, because you haven't been elected as a spokesperson. Like, this is such a diverse community. I would be upset if you spoke for me, because I think we agree on lots of stuff, but we also definitely disagree on lots of stuff, right?
Right. And I think the only thing we can agree on is we're both autistic.
Right, yeah.
And only because we both told each other that. Like, it's the only reason why I'm agreeing to that. Yes, people talk about how autism is so diverse and all of that, but so is every community. Like, very straightforward. I'm just going to throw it out there and hope to God nobody labels me as shitty just because I'm white. But my best friend is black. And when he talks about the black community, he's not typical black guy in America, right? Like, dude watches anime and he loves comic books. And, like, that's not what people conceptualize stereotypically as what that is. And when he talks about other black men in his community, he's talking about, like, they could be any color, they could be any race, they could be any gender, and he's talking about a vast majority of differences, right? And I think so in every community, there's differences inside their subset of what that community is. I think one of the problems that some people have, not all, but some people in the autism community have, and even ADHD, let's say neurodiverse in general, is they look at that we're all different kind of thing and blow that way bigger, I think, than it needs to be. Yes, me and you are different human beings, regardless of autism traits, regardless of, sensory sensitivities.
Regardless of the fact that we look like twins at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we look alike. Sorry, everybody. We got the same memo. You didn't. But anyway, yes, we are all different, but we need to personality-wise be different and still recognize the fact that we are all autistic. To a degree, we all have sensory sensitivities. To a degree, we all get stuck in our rigid thinking. To a degree, we all have repetitive behaviors. I mean, I keep doing this motion at you. Like, I'm not saying that's an autistic thing. I'm just saying I'm repeating it. But, you know what I mean? We need to focus on, having some level of unity. And I don't mean elect a spokesman, because I'm pretty sure I didn't put my ballot back in the mailbox yet. And I might do what I did for the presidential election and vote for Thanos. I really did. I voted for Thanos. So when I don't like the candidate, and people say that's a wasted vote, but fuck you, that's my vote. I get to do whatever I want with it. If I want to write it down on a card and like wipe my ass with it, I'm allowed to. It's my fucking vote. But I had one girl go, "You're the reason why Kamala Harris didn't win." I said, no, that's not me. Yeah, that one vote was not why. But anytime, whether it's local elections or presidential elections, if I don't like anybody, like if they say nothing that appeals to me, I vote for comic book characters. Because I really think Black Widow would have done a much better job than Joe Biden.
Right. And Spider-Man would actually make a pretty good spokesperson for the autistic community.
Hell yeah! Like, come on now. So
that's the definition of neurodivergence right there.
Yeah, like before I spouted off at the mouth, I decided to pause for a moment.
Congratulations.
Something that I'm very passionate about is when people say, I want our community to be treated better. I want our community to get the help that they need. But then they immediately turn around and say, no, this is how I'm not part of the community. Fuck off. I mean, there are some people that I've met who I would absolutely elect as being the, president of the autism community, because they're awesome people. Are they flawless? Fuck no. I would prefer to not have a flawless entity. But there are some awesome people out there that really seem to want to represent and take care of all autistic people. And that's cool. But they treat people as the individuals that they are. You know what I mean? For one, there's a lot of young folk who are being openly autistic, and that's cool that they're able to be. But they also have a lot of information that is just not true. Like, they haven't quite differentiated between autism, human, and their own personality. And yes, being born autistic does shape who your personality and what your personality is, but it's not the definitive of what your personality is. And I don't mean the people who only talk about autism and they make it all of, their thing. Because cool, I talk psychology all fucking day long. You call me Mr. Psych. I don't give a shit. But there's a difference in your personality and autism. And I know there are some people who are like, no, I'm autistic. I say that too, but I don't look at autism as the end to be all of what I am.
The DSM-5 is not your instruction manual.
Yes, exactly. I mean, yeah, I fit a bunch of that jazz to a T, and I'll own that. But I also fit bipolar to a T, and I'll own that one too. But those are things that have helped shape my personality. They didn't make my personality. And also, on the idea, and I'm going to jump around, dude. The coffee kicked in, so I'm jumping. When it comes to, things like when people say excuse versus explanation, me and Steve did a whole episode about it because it pisses me off. One of the reasons why is because I have heard people as of late who have actually been using autism as an excuse. Right. And I don't want to admit to that I've heard people use autism as an excuse. Because I feel when you say things like, I am autistic, that's more of an explanation of behavior in a lot of ways. Right. But it's when people say things like, that wasn't rude, that was my autism.
So, Nick, are you saying that your autism doesn't compel you to routinely do Hitler salutes, for example?
Right, yeah.
Just to pick a random example out of the air.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. Everybody who said he was doing it because he's autistic, no. He maybe do a social faux pas. Yes, but does social faux pas come out as the wrong kind of hand gesture?
And does extreme lack of impulse control maybe make you do dumb shit from time to time? Absolutely.
Sure.
And I am very glad that I don't have the entire world as my audience at all times. I feel like there would be many things to crucify me for. But also, I don't know. I feel like there's been a few folks that are definitely doing that. I did that because I'm autistic. What I will say is that I did listen to that episode, and anybody who's listening, please go listen to that episode. It's great. We don't have to relitigate.
I've gone this long and I haven't shamelessly promoted anything? My God, Steve would be so proud. Sorry to interrupt you. One of my social rules, and I kind of tell this to people around me, they can interrupt me at any given time because I don't come up for air. I just keep going because... I'm a trained improv performer, and that's my way of excusing the fact that I just jump all over the place, right? You could say ADHD, you could say Nick is, I don't know, hyperactive. Whatever you want to say, hopped up on coffee. I'll take whatever excuse or explanation you want to give. Mine is, I'm Nick, and Nick goes from one subject to another with little to no reason or rhyme. Sometimes there's connective tissue, and sometimes he just says McDonald's cheeseburgers are tasty for no reason.
But I have a question about that. So when you have a new person in your life, like a friend or whatnot, do you explain this to them?
So I am currently in the middle of doing a play. Okay. Well, a scene of a play, and the scene was written by Steve. Plug. It's done by the Collective in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Please come on down to watch the show. It's tonight at 7:30. It's called Roast of the Coast. Anyway, shameless plug number one. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, you got one.
So I was talking last night. So I ended up having an episode on Thursday. I call them episodes because it's easier for people to understand the severity of a meltdown if I just call it an episode opposed to meltdown. When I say meltdown, people go, oh, I've had one of those. No, you haven't. No, you had what you have, and I have what I have. But if I call it an episode, people feel the weight of it a little bit more. So I had an
Right.
episode on Thursday, and like right as we were starting dress rehearsal for the play, and last night was opening night, and like I was twitching out and tweaking and doing my thing, and like that body tense. I don't know how yours act, but that's kind of it comes out much more physical, and I have a much harder time communicating. And so some people actually have to know my hand gestures, right? Like, as if like I'm a high support needs person who's nonverbal, right? Same idea. I've got hand gestures. And I told this guy last night when he started to ask, I said, I don't want to talk about it. And not because I'm ashamed, but because I don't want to spend the amount of time it's going to take for me to truly communicate fully to you what happened last night. And I said to him, it takes me months to train my friends. Now, I initially said that as kind of a flippant answer and a kind of a way to make, like, keep distance, arm's length, one of those kind of statements. But it actually got me to start thinking about it. And it's a true statement. It's almost completely true. I'm training the people who feel like being around me to be around me. And, like, the people who truly stick around are the ones who already initially believed and understand that everybody's got their differences.
Yeah.
And those are the people who stick around. Me and Steve stuck around each other because, yeah, we have things we're interested in together, but it was also because we were both treated as different. We always felt like aliens in the world. And we also started to accommodate each other in little ways. We treated friends like friends. But there was also little things we did along the way. I don't like to be touched. One of my major sensory issues is being touched. It extends as far as there are some days where I can't take a shower because I don't want to feel the water on my skin. It feels like 1,000 fingers touching me, and I don't like people touching me, let alone the rain where I don't even know where that's coming from. I do. It's called the sky. And then immediately when I tell people I have problems with touch, because, well, how about your shoulder? It's just a thing I do. I don't give a shit. It's my body. Stop fucking touching me. And like I work with a bunch of old people now, and like, they're constantly touching the shoulder, touching the elbow, and back of the hand. I'm like, stop. No skin to skin contact. Let's pretend like I'm a leper, all right? It's way easier that way. You guys remember being lepers, right? 15,
150 years old, right?
Yeah, like, come on. You were alive when Christ was walking the earth, right? And so, like, people always ask when I tell them touch, they always ask, well, how is it with your girlfriend? One, my biz, not your biz. Right. Two, if she's cool with how much or how little or being dependent on my mood for touch, then absolutely, I'm sticking around with her, right? Like, that's a great relationship because she's respecting my boundary. And I said it with her up front. Like, I've been with my wife for 8 years. It's the greatest relationship I ever had. While being together, we've learned so much about neurodiversity and our own differences and acceptance and what really acceptance means. Acceptance doesn't mean I just give you what you want the way you want it for accommodation. No, it's how do we figure out how to make it work inside our relationship. God, I've got like 3 tangents I want to go on just based on that one sentence of mine, let alone the fact that you're just sitting there chilling. So anyone who's used to watching Autistic FM, unfortunately, Nick did what Nick always does, which is he overwhelmed something to the point where he took over. I apologize to all of you who enjoy this man's beautiful voice, but now you've got to listen to this one.
Okay. Well, and I have the right to interrupt you, so that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to invite you to do something. Dude, don't apologize for taking up space.
Well, because I'm the guest.
Right, but in a perfect world, I do only 20% of the talking, you do 80%. I think that's our ratio. This is great. This is an interview podcast.
If I get 80% of the time, then I got to do more podcasts.
You should go on more interview podcasts, man. The other curiosity I had, I noticed you were like, I was in a meltdowns, like almost like I was high support needs. In that moment, you are high support needs.
That's absolutely true. So I'm not a person who believes, and somebody's going to crucify me for this statement, but I am not a person who believes that our level of support changes over a lifetime, day to day, all of that kind of stuff. And one of the reasons why is because I used to run a group home. And so I had folks who were high support need, right? They didn't have days where they were low support need. Every single day they needed to have another human being next to them to shave them, shower them, help them eat, cook their food, make sure they don't run out into the road. That's high support need. And I'm not trying to say that there are people who don't need 24-hour support who aren't high support need. I'm not trying to say that. And I'm not trying to tell nobody what their support need level is. I'm saying based on my experience, which that's the only thing I'm an expert in, based on that alone, people who need 24-hour support are the folks that I say are high support need. Everybody else is medium and low. And I don't believe it shifts over a lifetime. I do believe that things about us can get more difficult as we get older, but there's still a level of, God, I'm going to have to use this word, but there's a level of functionality that we all have that is pretty consistent throughout our week, our month, our year. And I think that's more of the focus than day to day. You're right. There are days where I don't want to get out of bed. And then my wife brings me a cup of coffee in the morning and she gets the girls ready for school. And she's the one who packs their lunches and she's the one who cooks the food that day. And I didn't leave the bed. I didn't shower. I didn't brush my teeth. I didn't go to work. I actually called out of work. I risked being fired from my job. How irresponsible is that? You're right. But I wasn't having a medium support need day. I was having a bad fucking day. Mm-hmm. That's how I look at it. And I'm not telling nobody to adjust their frame of thinky. But if it does relate to you, or if it makes you feel better to look at it that way, cool, rock and roll, man. We can talk more about that. So I look at it that way, and like there are people we've interviewed that I consider kind of, autism community friends who disagree with that statement altogether. And they absolutely believe that people's support needs day-to-day change. Cool, rock and roll. And like if that's what gets you through the day, rock and roll, believe in that. Like if you believe in astrological signs and it gets you through your day, cool. I'm not going to argue with you. I think they're bullshit, but I'm not arguing with you. You believe what you believe because ultimately it's the faith we have in what we believe that carries us through our day, not the validity of what we believe in. What I was trying to say was like support needs, because you're right, in that moment I need more support, but it's the support that I need in that moment that nobody can truly give me other than just being there. And so, like, after opening night last night, me and a couple of friends who I do improv with, we went to the cast party. And one of them, who I've known for, like, 2 years, and I've trained her well, some feminist is going to be like, you trained her, how dare you? No, she's a friend, and she understands that Nick has a problem in certain social situations, and to keep him from being highly irritable and fucking, like, roasting the shit out of people and pissing them off, she will walk into social situations for me and get a drink for me. And that's what she did. I said, oh, this is out. And she immediately stood up and said, I'll go get you another one. I didn't have to ask. She didn't volunteer. She just immediately stood up and went because she knows that that's uncomfortable for me. And so there are times where she gets uncomfortable and she starts to stutter. And I immediately step in and start to translate with whoever she's talking to because she feels uncomfortable with it because she trained me how to be her friend. I'm really appreciative of the people in my life who do that. And to me, it's not an accommodation they're making for me. It's a reciprocation of friendship. We all do that for each other. And so like when I had my episode and I told them that I had the episode on Thursday, I didn't have to explain shit. They both went, oh, how you feeling now? Mm-hmm. Like that's understanding the other human being, right? They didn't ask, what was it like? What caused it? None of it was, how you doing now?
I feel like one of those things is essentially voyeurism, and the other thing is being your friend.
Yes.
And there is a space for curiosity, right? But I feel like if somebody's really optimizing for the drama, oh, do you know what Nick did? Like, who gives a shit? That's not what friends do.
No, not at all. And that's why they cared more about what happened next opposed to what was happening. Because both of them understand, you know what? It could have been stress of his day. People could have touched him too much. It could have been raining. Like when we did Macbeth last August, it was horribly raining outside and I had to walk. People are going to be like, come on, man. It wasn't that far. It was maybe 100 feet. You know what? 100 feet when it's raining is fucking torturous.
And of course it was raining. It was the Scottish play.
What are you, a theater person? You call it the Scottish play? Come on, just call it by its name.
You said the N word. I don't know.
Yeah, like I'll be on stage and say Macbeth. I got no problem with it. And you know what's weird though? We did actually have somebody die. Believe it or not, no. Like, and I'm not even joking. We had a cast member die.
Yeah, no, it's Macbeth. You can't fuck around with it.
You know, jokingly, Mike tapped me and said, see, you keep saying Macbeth on stage. Fucker, you killed him. And I'm like, I didn't kill anybody. And he goes, you don't understand. By the way, the gentleman who died was a wonderful guy. He was like 70, almost 80 years old, and he was questioning whether he was autistic or not. And like me and Steve would talk to him about it and kind of talk about like ways for him to learn more and get into it. Really cool guy. I really liked him a lot. He wasn't a great actor, but he started way late in life doing it.
Well, you shouldn't have
just
killed
wanted to do
him.
it. Well, I probably shouldn't have, but he wasn't that good of an actor. So what good is he? No, he was a great artist. Great artist. And he actually let me borrow his boff swords, so his fake swords, so I could train people to do the fight scene at the end of Macbeth.
That is amazing. Most of my theater stuff was as a pyrotechnician and as a stage fighter. So that was kind of my theater slice. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about support needs. I hear you, it's like, okay, low support, that makes sense. But I also want to underscore that I think it's entirely valid to recognize that you are giving yourself support. And that when I am having an episode, or if I'm having a really hard time and I'm low on resources, I'm unable to support myself. Not because necessarily because my support needs are higher, but because my self-support capacity is lower.
Yes.
And I think that's a nuance that is worth naming, because I feel like a lot of people are like blaming themselves for not being able to hold it together. And that's like, I mean, you started this whole episode with people need to be kinder to themselves.
Right.
That's where I'm like the least kind on myself. And I think it's worth naming that.
We internalize that. We immediately invert it and say, how come I'm not more able? What expectation did you set for yourself to begin with? And was it too high to begin with? Or are you doing that unfortunate thing that we as humans do? Did you compare yourself to somebody else in that moment? That's something that I work on daily, of like reworking that mental cognitive habit of comparing myself to others, because it doesn't do nothing for nobody, right? It is a horrible habit humans have. Fallacy of fairness, it's called. It's one of the cognitive distortions. We look at somebody else and say, how come they can have and I can't, opposed to going, what can I do to make that happen, right?
Yep.
And in this regard, we're looking at somebody else who seems like they're putting it together or keeping it together when we don't know what they're going through in their mind.
Right.
They could be standing there in a 3-piece suit with gold chains around them, with beautiful humans adorned on their arms, but internalized, they're like, so how should I die today? We don't know. But what we look at, we say they seem put together. And once I come out of episodes and my head's not going, you suck so badly, I start to say that to myself of like, I don't know what any other actor was going through Thursday night. I don't know who else's life is going to shit, but they happen to come to rehearsal, because I need to put it in perspective, because A, I'm not the most important person in the world. I'm definitely not the most worst off person in the world. And that's something I think some of the young autistic people need to learn how to put into perspective is, I get life sucked. I get it. But life sucked for a lot of us. And that doesn't mean to diminish your pain, the effect it had on you. But we got to understand the context. There are people, not just in other countries, there are people in the US who have it way worse off. Than us. And that doesn't mean our pain is not real. That doesn't mean we can't talk about our pain, but we also need to make sure that we're addressing that our situation could have been far fucking worse off.
And this is where the all or nothing thinking kind of falls in our detriment, right? It's like, well, I'm not doing the best in this on the street, so therefore I must be doing the worst kind of thing.
Right. And also mental filtering to the negative. If you're always negatively mental filtering, then you're always going to think that you're the worst off. But then we're going into those grounds of like victim mentality and stuff. And I know that's like kind of a buzzword right now. Oh, victim Olympics. It's a real fucking thing, and it's a real process in your head.
This is the number one thing I'm working on with my therapist right now. My life isn't happening to me. I am living my life.
Right.
And I keep having to repeat that to myself. This is not something I don't have control over. I have a lot of control over what's happening. And I have to keep reminding myself, because I keep forgetting. And I'm like, I'm a 40-something-year-old dude, and I still don't remember that I have agency in my own life. That feels a little embarrassing.
Well, have you ever heard of Albert Ellis?
No.
Cool. I get to educate you on him. I love it.
Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, it's a psychology guy. He was a therapist a bunch of years ago. He's kind of like one of those big names that they teach you about in college and shit. But the reason why I bring him up, I love his REBT, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy. I dig it. I'm a super big fan, and it works for autism, right? Because it's a step-by-step process from A to B, not A to B, because he's got A, B, C, D. I think there's an E in there now. But it's just this step-by-step, methodical look at what happened, what was our response, how did we think about it, what are we going to do about it, what's the outcome. But there's other therapeutic parts to it. The reason why I bring him up, not only am I a big fan of the guy, especially because he's like this really old, brash Jewish gentleman, he wrote a book called The Myth of Self-Esteem. I loved this book, and somebody put it in my path at a time where I needed to understand about what conditioned responses, conditional love, conditional acceptance were. Since I read the book, I have walked the rest of my life not giving a fuck about you accepting me. I need to accept me, and not accept me when I'm good. I need to accept me when I'm bad. I need to accept me when I just pissed off and made my wife cry because I said something really stupid. It's not that I need to go to her and apologize, because yes, I do for the relationship's sake, not for me. But what I need to do in that moment is accept the fact that I said it, and I still need to like me afterward. And the reason for that is because we are people who will do bad. We will do things that are mistakes. We will do things that are great. But all of that is who we are, so we need to accept all of that. Unconditional acceptance and unconditional love. We need to love without return. We need to love self without having proof. I would say if you're an atheist, love yourself the way a Christian loves God. You ain't got proof. You ain't got evidence to support. You love because you exist, or because you believe you exist. Unconditionally, regardless of what evidence is put in front of you, regardless of the ideological contradictions, none of that. Love you for you, period. And if somebody's hearing me say that and they go, well, I don't know if I can because I don't like the weight I am. I don't like that I have no skill, or that I can't hold a job, or that my parents hate me. None of that fucking matters to this. Not even necessarily looking yourself in the mirror, but it's you looking at you and saying, you okay. And if okay is not good, you can't reach okay today, cool, then just say you ain't shitty. Like, step by step, get up there to the point where you can say in a public forum like this, I'm amazing and wonderful just being the Nick I am. Do I have bad days? Fuck yeah. Do I have shitty days? Yeah. And are there times that I'm a horrible human being and that I gnaw at that really insecure thing of somebody and I break them down psychologically where they're affected for a week? I've done it. I try to avoid it now. And now I just say things like, go fuck yourself, and I walk the fuck away. Because I have a little bit more control over that than I used to. But I accept the fact that I once used to do it.
I will tell you to go fuck yourself out of kindness, because the things I want to say to you are much worse. Bye!
I wish people would thank me for that, but they don't.
Oh, thank you, Nick. This is a gift.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick, for only saying I'm a waste of space, opposed to all the other things you would have said. I really like that book because it put that in perspective for me. And not just put that in perspective, it demonstrates in that book all of the things about society that condition us to be conditional. And he breaks down religions and social structures in America that drive us to want other people's conditional love.
And from what you're saying here, I'm really hearing why this connects, or the way I'm connecting this to autism specifically is like, especially if you're late diagnosed, right? Like my childhood was so fucking confusing because I could never quite understand like why I was being bullied, why I was feeling different. And it all became like, okay, how do I live up to other people's standards so they will hopefully ignore me? That would be like the baseline. But then better than that, maybe like me. I aim for like, and hopefully I get
Maybe. Yeah,
ignored. Yeah,
maybe.
maybe.
Yeah,
But
maybe call us once to go to a movie with them. Maybe.
right. But what you're actually doing there from a psychological point of view is you're building up an entire external reinforcement structure that
Yes.
when you're a grown up, that falls apart. I am having to retrain myself from like, I need to stop people pleasing. I've gotten myself into so many shitty situations
Mhm.
by people pleasing way too far, giving
Yes.
up, like overstepping my own boundaries so
Uh-huh.
much. This came to an incredible head. So my girlfriend has a 4-year-old who is absolutely delightful. And I turned to my girlfriend at some point, just like, why does he love me? I don't do anything for him. And she was like, holy hell, dude, you need to work on that. Because he just loves you because you are you. You don't have to do anything for anyone for
Right.
them to love you. And I was like, I need to go talk to my therapist.
Uh-huh.
And I'm still working on that piece. I'm like, it is so deeply ingrained to me. Like, if I'm
Yeah.
not useful, I'm not lovable. Oh,
So I'm still dealing with that a great deal myself. So I've never
yeah.
been a people pleaser because I learned a very long time ago, in at least in my own life. I learned when I was a little kid, when I was a ballet dancer as a kid. I learned I can't please people because no matter how well I danced on stage, I was still a guy surrounded by girls dancing ballet. So I couldn't
Right.
make nobody happy. My parents constantly said, do better. Weirdly enough, Steve, my other best friend, happens to also do the exact same verbal shit to me. Like I said, he wrote the scene that I'm doing. Okay. Like I have another performance tonight and he's coming. I know when I step off stage, Steve is going to go. That was good
I
and
have some
all,
notes.
but you missed this line. And he will
Right.
get specific down to the thes and us of a fucking line. My response is always, great, go tell someone else. Well, but you're the one who said it. And I said, yes. And I care as much as a complete stranger you're going to go tell. And he's like, well, don't you want to get it right? And I said, I already did. That's what right is. It's what I did.
That is what I love about theater. It happens once on stage. Maybe there's multiple nights, maybe there's multiple performances, but the performance only happens once. And you can flub your lines as bad as you want. You can screw it up as many times as you want. You can fall apart, you can stutter, but that is the performance. And I think there's something so. I went to see Hamilton, and one of the performers quite obviously fucked something up, but it made it special. I was like, you missed your cue for starting a song, but you caught yourself, you fixed it. The band did something magical to help you. And I was like, we got to witness like geniuses fucking up and fixing it on stage. And I was like, that performance is special because not despite of.
Right. Nobody else is going to see that performance ever again in all of existence. You were lucky. You were privileged. You should be appreciative of the fact that you are literally one of what, 200 people in all of existence who will ever see that performance. I love to have gratitude for moments like that. Because some people might say, well, Hamilton ran for years and there were tons of performances, but nobody's ever going to be able to see that Friday in 2019, August, whatever it would have been, right? Nobody else is going to see that ever. Nobody.
And the thing that makes me extra happy is that not even everybody in the audience will have noticed. And so I get to be the theater nerd who went, I spotted something. And I get to nerd out with my friends in the bar after. I'm like, oh, did you notice the thing when the... So cool.
So I'm going to actually tie this back into what we were talking about acceptance and about conditioning and about all that. If you think about it, okay, if you had walked in that room or walked out of that room, I should say, and said, you know, people saw it. You've now also just proven that you've missed so many other moments in your own life that actually make you the special that you want to be. Like, so many people are like, I'm great at blah, blah, blah. That's not what made you special. Anybody could spend the amount of time to learn that fucking skill. What makes you special is the experiences that no one else can have. Because even though you sat with 1,000 people in that room, 2,000 people in that room, everything that happened to you leading up to that moment is what allowed you to have that moment. So nobody else on the planet can ever have that. And that's what's actually making each of us special. Me and you having this conversation. This is what makes us special. Not because we're talking autism, not because we are autistic, not because of the differences that autism has created in us. It's because me and you, every moment of our life brought us here. That's what makes this truly special. And like, I'm very grateful for any time I get to connect with another human being for that, because their entire life prepared them to talk to me. My entire life prepared me to talk to them in that given moment, even if it's just at Starbucks and we're both going, why can this human being not pour coffee? But we share that moment, and it is unique to only us. And that's really what makes it special. Like, I got a piano behind me, and I'm sorry to jump yet again, but I got a piano behind me. I quit my job back in August to be a stay-at-home dad, and also to avoid a job where I was being touched a lot because, it's a group home, and high support need people sometimes get a little handsy. I'm saying that in a nice way. But my point behind that is, back in September, after spending a few weeks of hating myself for quitting a job and not living up to the expectations of a husband and a father and a man and a blah, blah, blah. Yeah, after dealing with all that BS, right? I decided to go back to something that created love and joy in me, but I didn't spend a lot of time on it because I sacrificed what I love at times to be the husband, the father, the worker, the productive human, the blah, blah, conditional stuff. Like I said, I'm still working through it myself, right? And so I went back to playing piano. And I've spent the last 10 months playing piano and learning how to play piano, improving my singing voice. Other people can do this shit. I'll tell you, I use the app Musician. It's $14.99 a month, and you too can learn 5 different instruments, including singing. You can get as good as Nick. I wouldn't say I'm good, but it brings me joy.
It'll bring you down to Nick's level. Go for it.
It'll bring you right down here. You too can also say fuck at inappropriate times. All right. But I get joy from it. And whether people like what I'm doing or not, I don't care. It brings me love. And you know what? Giving me love is great. And I can honestly say that, and that's without ego. That is a matter of, I enjoy giving me love now. I used to hate it because I was afflicted by that idea of, I'm being selfish. No, I'm not. I'm giving me love because I deserve love. I'm giving me love because if I try to please everybody else and give them love, I don't get nothing left for me. But if I give me love, I got love to give. You know what I mean? Like, I got a weird, like, Barry White almost thing going on there.
No, but you're not wrong, right? This is so fucking important to kind of lean all the way into that thing. Yeah, hey, I promised my guests to keep these episodes to an hour, and I've already broken my promise. I want to make sure that we have an episode at the end of this. And I like to end these with 2 questions that are the same for everybody. The first one is, what do you wish neurotypicals knew about neurodivergent folks?
Yeah, I'm going to be real honest about this. Fucking nothing. I wish all people understood all people better. Mm-hmm. And all people looked at and addressed all people as the individuals that they are, with the differences they bring. The rhetoric of NT versus ND, I hate. Because their world didn't make your world shitty or hard. You existing in it didn't make your life shitty and hard. And you were not responsible. They are not responsible. But what are we doing about it now? I don't like to blame things for anything. I like to find a solution for whatever it is we feel is a problem. Because if you think black and white thinking is your problem, then work on diminishing it. You're never going to make it go away. Mm-hmm. Work on making it less impactful on you. If you think that the NT world needs to change everything they're doing to make you feel better, but what are you doing to make you feel better? Are you sitting around on TikTok and whining that NTs are ruining your existence? By the way, I'm kind of saying that kind of shitty and kind of mean, but I really mean by it is like, the more we do us-them rhetoric for any community, anything in the world, the more we do that, the more we have us-them. And when we start to tear down that us-them and realize that we're all interconnected, we're all similar in some ways, then we can all get along better. You know what I mean? Like, what accommodation are you giving to the NT who also has baggage they're bringing to that moment? They also have trauma. They also have issues. They also have things that they're bringing to that moment that you're not recognizing, that you're not validating. You're asking for somebody to validate all your shit, but yet you're not validating any of theirs?
I think that is entirely true. I love the passion, but I don't think it's entirely true, though, because we're swimming in a neurotypical world, right? If you are a minority, then it's like, what do you wish the rest of the world knew about your minority? Like, I will admit that I don't fully know what people celebrate at Holy, right? And so if I choose that's something I want to know about, it's my responsibility to learn that. I don't fully understand, like, I'm European.
Holy shit, I thought you were born in Harlem. What the hell?
But this is relevant in that the discourse around slavery in the US for the longest time was incredibly confusing to me because like as Europe, like important part of the slave trade, but not really like it doesn't exist in the same way in the culture. And so I had to spend a lot of time, I have a whole bunch of books here, educating myself about the history of slavery, about what it's like to be a Black person in the US today. So I feel like that is things that we can choose to educate ourselves about, right? And so as a neurotypical person who goes, oh, neurodivergence exists, sure. Like, where do I even start? And I think, I know I'm getting a little defensive here, but the reason I asked the question is hopefully some neurotypicals listen to this podcast and can get a glimpse into like, oh, this is one thing I wish you really understood. And so I appreciate where you're coming from, and your reply isn't helpful to somebody who is curious about learning.
So one of the reasons why I carry that opinion is because I've heard so much rhetoric from autistic people saying NTs need to change, that neurotypicals need to just. No, they don't need to fucking nothing. And they're not going to. Like, society is not going to change because 6% of the population says, oh, poor me, look at me. They don't give a fuck. Like, look at the LGBT community, which I'm a member of. Like, fuck, we've been striving for fucking a long ass time in America to get recognized, and yet we're still treated as if we either A, don't exist, we're wrong from birth, how dare we do it, we need to change our behavior. Like, neurodivergence is new. Like, let's go have this conversation in 70 years in that regard. I also think even with that, though, creating the us-them causes both sides to not want to listen to the other. And when you're
But we have a pretty deep dual empathy problem as it is, right? The two of us permanently live in a world that is mostly neurotypical. I'm not going to give you a hard time about your answer. Your answer is your answer, and your answer is great. Thank you.
And I'm not necessarily getting defensive in the sense of like, oh my God, you're not agreeing with me. I understand that some of my perspectives on some things like are not the most popular in the autism community. But I also know that this is the first time the autistic community or neurodivergent folks have been able to have a real voice where they feel somewhat connected to others. I do understand that. And so there's also a lot of rhetoric about that too, right? And I know that's part of what creates the us-them. But I also know that the only way you bring about change from a societal point of view is you have to have people from all sides coming together to make that change happen. And unfortunately, we're not encouraging NTs to learn well or learn from us if we're saying you're at fault, deal. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm thinking about it from that perspective too. Plus, when I go out and talk to people, I don't come at them from an educational, I need to educate them standpoint. I come at it from the counseling perspective of meet them where they're at. So if they don't know shit, or they only know their grandson and he sits on the ground and plays with toys and doesn't talk to anybody, that's all they know. Like, I'm not trying to educate in the same way, but it's more about giving them an experience with an autistic person who is different than what they know.
Totally. I think the truth is that nobody who isn't curious is going to be listening to this podcast anyway, so I'm not going to change the world with this.
Nobody's going to listen to it who's not already autistic or interested in autistic experience. There's no doctor who's going to be like, oh my God, these guys are autistic and they're able to talk? What?
But this is the interesting piece for me. Like, a lot of the time, I'm like, the thing that really offends me is uncurious people. A lot of the discourse that is happening right now in certain political parties and in certain circles, it isn't hard to get a little bit of basic information to get better empathy into the people, whether that's gay rights or abortion or like immigration. Like as we're recording this, there's ICE riots happening, right? You can Google. You can figure out what is the actual thing that is happening right now. Why are people upset? You don't have to spout off on the internet about shit you don't know without educating yourself. But I think that curiosity, like I describe myself as pathologically curious. I am constantly learning shit, right? And I get a sense you are the same. And so I think if you are curious, you can learn shit. Books are cheap. The internet is free, right?
I would actually encourage anybody, especially with some of the issues you just named off, I would actually encourage anybody who listens to your show, go seek out the opposite opinion of what you already have.
Yes.
Don't just listen to you and yours. Like, go to the opposite. I'm politically a libertarian, right? Which means in a way I straddle between the two on different issues. But anytime I hear somebody on one side of the equation say something a certain way, I immediately, if interested, I immediately go to the exact opposite side and find out what the other party is saying. And not because like I think one is better than the other. It's literally because I think truth lies in the middle of the two of them. Because both have rhetoric, both have agendas, and both have manipulative tactics that work on the people who adhere to those ideologies. So like on the left, they talk about empathy way more. They talk about feels way more because people who are more left are more about that, right?
Right.
But that's their way of manipulating them. People on the right, they talk more in a logical, practical, common sense way, right? That's the way they say things, even though most of their logic gets defeated by purely adding in one factor that made no sense to their fucking equation. Right. By the way, everybody, yes, I'm libertarian, but I also lean left, all right? But on both sides, like I'm not a big fan of either one of them because they both have their tactics. Their tactics fucking work for the people they're trying to speak to. And that's why I voted for Thanos. He spoke to me. What? Kill half the world? Great. What half?
At least he treats everybody the same.
Oh, my God. The first time I told somebody I voted for Thanos, they said, oh, you want to kill everybody? And I said, not everybody, just half of them. And they were like, oh, what half? No. I'm okay with top half, bottom half, whatever. Like somebody will replace somebody in that equation. Because I honestly believe that that's really what's going to help all of society is when people treat everybody the same. And I don't mean the old school version of the same. I mean treat each other the same. I honestly believe that. And you know what, everybody? I am certain things that you're going to assume just based on your own observation of the way I look. You don't know my life. You have no idea what I've been through that brought me to that opinion. But I truly, honestly believe that all people need to treat all other people equally. And we can add in the word equity to that. To me, that means equal too. So all of that, right? Call the idea DEI, affirmative action. You can call it whatever you want. People need fucking help. And we need to all make sure everybody is able to get to the same point. And if there's shit in the way, get it out of the fucking way. Obstacles aren't needed. We're human. We all need to be human together.
That's a good soapbox too. What I tried to interrupt you with was that I miss intellectually honest debates. Like if people can come to the table and just go like, hey, we don't agree, but let's agree that I'm not here to destroy you and I'm not going to use nasty tactics to say, hey, your stupid beard is wrong. It's like that is not relevant. Let's have a real intellectually honest debate about stuff we both care about. I love that stuff. In the early days of the internet, I did that all the time. And at some point, people learned that it's much easier to defeat someone by not playing fair, like all the techniques people use to destroy each other. And the fun went out of it for me. It was like, this is no longer a sparring match. This is me showing up at a judo mat with my full gi and you're there with a machine gun. I was like, look, I appreciate that you want to win, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here for the sparring.
Yeah, I agree. One of the final debates I actually watched that I actually enjoyed. There's a lot of debates that go on like the Jubilee jazz that happens. You literally picked people who were just going to go, no, you're wrong. Like the Ben Shapiro one, I can respect and appreciate things he says because he says we need to have open debate whether you agree or disagree. But it needs to be in good faith that you ask the question, not trying to get me, not trying to set up. But the last one I watched was Bill Nye versus Ken Ham. Okay. And it was kind of like a theological debate, science versus God, if you will. And one of the
Right.
reasons why I liked it is because even when the other one said you're wrong, it was still respectfully and then backed up with what they believed. I mean, granted, Bill Nye had, science and he had research. But one of the things is Bill Nye never said this is the truth. He said this is evidence to support, which is what science is. Like, I hate it when people throw around, well, I have facts to back me up. No, you have evidence to support your point of view. And sure, we all consider that a law of science, but it's still evidence to support it, right? And then Ken Ham went, well, but the Bible says, because that to him is the evidence to support his point of view.
Right.
But neither one of them were like, you're an idiot. Neither one of them were like, no, your idea is wrong, and here's why. Instead, they supported their point of view, opposed to trying to prove the other one wrong. They weren't trying to one-up each other. And so I appreciated watching those. And then when I saw the Jubilee ones, when I watched the Charlie Kirk, the college campuses, now there are great times where he will have a good back and forth with somebody that is out of respect, and it's just two people conveying opinions. And I really enjoy those. But then there are other times where people step up to the mic to try to argue something that A, is not worth fucking arguing, and B, you already know his opinion. You're literally quoting his opinion to him to set up some level of, oh, that's wrong. No, don't try to use that man's words against him. He is well versed in debating. Like, that sounds dumb to me. And yet people do it. And don't get me wrong, like, there's a lot of stuff Charlie Kirk says that I don't agree with. But I also can respect how much time and energy he's put into looking shit up, reading about it, learning about it, and learning the other side's point of view. And that's something a lot of people don't hear or see, is he has to understand where you're coming from to be able to argue the way he does. And yes, there are times where he says some inflammatory shit just to rile you up and get the one up on the conversation. Yeah, sure he does, but it wouldn't be entertaining if he didn't do that. And that's why like millions of people watch his show. I only see him on TikTok because, I don't know, somehow looking up autism brings up videos of Charlie Kirk.
We have a niche audience, Nick. We have a niche audience.
Yeah.
The final question that I love to use in these episodes is, would you tell me of a time when you were seen and loved in exactly the right way for you?
I mean, I took a shower earlier, so I looked in the mirror. Like, that's a flippant response.
It's good, though, because a lot of us struggle with that.
Yeah, I don't have the body I wish I had. I don't look ideally the way I think I should look or the way I'd want to look, right? But I look the way I look. I am the way I am. There are days where I'm like, man, I wish my beard came in a little better here, there. This little sack right here is so weird. Why am I going gray here and over here, but not as much here? Like, of course I have those days. But I also can stand in front of the mirror with a little bit of a gut and not enough pec and not enough muscle and go, but that's me. And then on the other side of that, I don't ask myself, because you asked, when did I feel loved? I feel loved 100% of the time because I know no matter what I do, no matter what I say, and no matter how effed up or bad of a day I'm having, no matter how impulsive I'm being, no matter what inappropriate word I use in whatever social situation I shouldn't have used that word in, I know my wife is right next to me. Mm-hmm. I know all 4 of my children are right next to me. And their support, even just emotionally, gets me through every social interaction with a confidence of, I don't give a fuck what these people have to say about me. Most days, except for when I'm having my episodes. And of course I'm going, because I'm going to say this as a blanket statement, an overgeneralized statement, if you will. Yes. Autistic people have so much goddamn emotion, but we love to the same degree we hate, or love as much as we feel depressed. So if you're sitting right now in a really super depressed state and you're like contemplating the bad things, A, understand that that will fade. Just give it time. Guaranteed it will, because that's how emotions work. And on the other side of that, you can love something, including yourself, just as much as a minute ago when you hated yourself. Because we have so much joy and love and hate and depression and anxiety, and we have it in such a level that others can't understand it, but we have so much of it, but that's a goddamn gift. Oh my God, like people can hear, and you've commented twice on the level of passion that I have with things. That is my whole existence. And some people call me intense, and they call me combative and brash and overwhelming and all of these things. Guess what? I'm cool with that. Because if it's too much for you, cool, I apologize, and please enjoy the rest of your day. And if you want to be around a human being like me, bravo, let's go make some stupid jokes together. Just understand that passion also comes with impulsivity and some things I'm going to say in the wrong way. But I don't necessarily mean, I'm just going to say it. Like I might, in a fit of anger, say, you dumb fucking cunt, go die. But what I really mean is, you offended me, and I feel really hurt and disappointed. Please love me anyway. And I know the two of those don't make any sense to one another, but that's what impulsivity is. You don't think it all the way through, and your emotions take over. But it's okay. Because even after I say it, even after you yell at me, even after, somebody who loves you punches me in the face, we can all go have a beer together. Because I'll have calmed down, because I'll be sitting on the ground going, why did you punch me? I know why. Kinda. But, because for me, words are just words.
And you're saying something really important there, which is that you're choosing to be unmasked. You could make a different choice. You could make a choice where you filter everything you say and think it through. Okay, fine. Some of us, I can do that. And when I do that, I get exhausted and I don't feel truly like me. And that's a choice I can make. And that sucks. That world of me sucks.
That was part of what my episode was on Thursday, is I had a long day at work. And yes, of course, I have to mask to a degree at work. But it was the theater group that I'm working with right now. They're Steve's friends. Which means I'm trying my damnedest not to piss them off, because Steve would have to deal with the repercussions of that, right?
Right.
And he's used to dealing with the repercussions when we're in public and I say something dumb. I don't want to piss these people off because he likes them, he respects them, he wants to work with them more. So I feel as if I have to hold in even more, which my day was already long and hard. And so I didn't have a whole lot left. And so it came out as a physical twitch, which people assumed I was just nervous for the show. You can assume whatever you'd like. I'm the only one who needs to know truth. And like somebody even said, I don't know why they thought I wasn't going to hear it, but somebody said behind, oh, he'll be fine after he gets off stage, assuming that I'm just nervous. Nope.
Right.
Not at all.
Just a quick question about that. Were you able to continue the performance or were you out?
Dude, I ain't going to let that down. I'm always going to be on.
See, that's the thing, right? So you're able to have a meltdown, then mask up sufficiently to go out on stage and do your thing. I think that's a really good encapsulation of what many of us do all the fucking time. It's like,
all the fucking time.
I need to have a meltdown right now, but also I need to drive my car for the next 45 minutes because I'm going to this meeting. I can drive a little bit faster, so I have 5 minutes, so I can have a meltdown in my car for 5 minutes and then walk into the meeting.
And alleviate just enough to walk into the meeting. Yeah, I can tell you some of the less constructive ways that I manage stuff like that, but I also don't want to be teaching anybody in your audience less constructive ways of managing that.
Right. I'm sure many of us have figured those out.
Yes, I mean, coffee's one, alcohol's another, and I'll tell you one of them is on the side of my thigh. I will take my hand in a kind of a reverse hammer fist and I will slam on my thigh, and just that level of pain, just that level of pressure disrupts that thought process just enough. And so like Thursday night, I slammed my hand in my thigh twice, hurt enough. So I went, my leg, opposed to, my brain, right? And I walked out on stage, did part of my scene. I came off stage. I put on the new shirt for the new character, because I got 3 characters in the damn thing. Put on the new shirt, slammed on my leg, went out there. And I've got not a bad bruise, because I've been doing it for years, but that's a destructive coping mechanism, because I'm physically causing harm to myself. On some level, it's like when people cut, right? They're feeling pain in another area. They're feeling
Totally, yeah.
sensation. It's the same idea, not as severe as physically cutting yourself, but it's still the same idea. And in that, like, nobody should ever do it. I do it, but I also, a very long time ago, before I knew a lot of this stuff about myself, before I even knew the difference between a positive and negative coping skill, I learned to do that. So it's kind of a last resort for me when I have to. When I have to walk into a meeting and I'm melting
In case
down.
of emergency, break leg.
Yeah, break leg. Yeah, which is weird because when you go on stage, break legs. I will. Okay. I just realized how funny that is, actually, between those two statements. Your question was about love, and I didn't directly answer it because I still have a very bad RSD response, let's call it. Let's call it just for definition's sake. I have to walk into, and I say have to, and I don't like saying have to, but it's the way I feel, so I'm just going to talk from an emotional standpoint, not a logical or intellectual standpoint. I have to walk into every interaction with every group of people, including friends and family, feeling as if I will immediately be rejected the second I walk in the door. The people will hate me because I exist. And that level of uncomfortable for me, I don't ever truly believe that I can feel what you're asking. I feel I can get close to it. I feel I can get right on that borderline as if I got a ticket and I'm the next one allowed in, but I'm always going to be standing there in that line because I don't feel it for me. Like I love me. I accept me. I understand parts of me, or most of the parts of me, and all that stuff I said before. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, when I lay down in bed, can I say absolutely I am truly loved? I can't tell you I felt that ever. But what I can tell you is the closest I can feel to that, my family embodies completely. I have come to a point where I'm standing next to me in that line, waiting to cross to be able to be seated in the feeling love, right? And I'm okay with where that is because I don't know how to shake that feeling. I don't know how to shake that idea that no matter how long you've known me, no matter how well you love me, no matter how much you can tolerate the things I do or accommodate me for the ways I am, I still feel like at any given moment, you're going to say fuck you and walk away. And it's that level of rejection because I've had it many a times, and I could give examples, but you wanted to wrap this up, and yet I still took another 30 minutes to answer two simple fucking questions.
You know what I want to say, though, is that it took us 20 minutes to get here, but that was a real answer, and I really appreciate you for it.
Yeah. I don't want this to sound like the rest of what we talked about was fake. The rest of it was in my head, and being in my head is easy. My first therapist said, Nick, our goal is to connect you to your head. And I said, what the fuck are you talking about? And she said, I want you to be able to both. And she goes, you don't. You just gave me a beautiful rationalization of why you married your wife, a different woman at the time. And I said, isn't that how you answer questions? And she said, no, you didn't use a single emotion word in the entire thing. So everything that I said before is absolutely 100% true. But when you ask me that question, I can't answer with anything but my metaphorical, emotional place. Because that is something that I've always strived for and I don't believe I can get. For an assortment of reasons, including there's a level of I don't believe I deserve it. I believe I've caused enough harm to other people that I don't 100% deserve to be fully and truly absolutely loved. And I think a lot of people can probably maybe understand that too, for an assortment of reasons. And I didn't expect to get a little emotional on you, but I'm going to stop myself from crying, but still keep myself in a nice little vulnerable spot for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think this is one of those things. Let me stop myself. I'm going to reword that sentence. When folks in the autism community say therapies don't work on us, I think that is completely and 100% wrong. I think what we feel the goal of therapy is doesn't work. This is the goal of therapy. It's not to erase symptoms. It's not to cure anything. It's not to make shit go away. It's to make it so we can overcome the way we've poorly treated ourselves, so we can get to a point so we can truly feel. And that's a hard place to get to, because based on how much trauma we have, the trauma's stopping us from getting there. And so it's not that we're making the trauma go away. It's we're learning to live with it and accept its existence and the impact it had on us so we can feel again. Yeah. And so I've gotten to a place where I can actually be emotional with others and truly accept that. And I'm not saying I can't get better over time, because I'm still working on it. Like, I'm still working on walking in a door and not immediately telling everybody to fuck themselves, because I think that's what they're going to say to me. Right? Like, I'm responding to shit that didn't happen yet.
I mean, that's a great defense mechanism, right? What you just said speaks really deeply to me, because I had an experience where I went to a week-long sacred sexuality workshop. And of course,
one more time?
A week-long sacred sexuality workshop.
Man, I just love that name. Like, I don't know anything about what it is, but the name by itself makes me think a whole lot of shit. But anyway, keep going.
It was a bunch of witches and hippies that were going through all sorts of interesting rituals. Throughout that week, lots and lots of people got extremely activated, triggered, and dug into a lot of deep shit for people, right?
Absolutely.
I fell apart on the first morning of day one. Nobody had even taken their clothes off yet. And the exercise was called the horse and rider. And the idea was to get your head, so the rider, to talk to your body. And I was like, I can do that. And then the horse to talk to the rider. So your body to talk to your head. This is all like Van der Kolk, the body keeps the score, etc. But basically, I did that for less than a minute and then had the most epic meltdown I have had in public ever. Yeah. And I was like, oh God, this is the first time. And I've been in tons of workshops. I've done tons of therapy, and somehow just allowing my body to talk to my head, my body was like, motherfucker, I've got some shit to say to you. Yeah. And I fell apart, and I was broken for 6 months after that. I went back and did the same workshop again 6 months later, and actually was able to get all the way through it. But I think you just said something really important. And the reason I'm telling this story is to underscore what you just said, which is the goal of therapy, I think, for a lot of us people who are like so in our heads, is to actually let the body do a little bit of talking every now and again. Yeah.
And for our heads to do a little listening.
Yeah.
You know, the expression, you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth to do one more than the other. Right. In this regard, like, your brain has a lot of things going on, but why not also let that heart, right? You only got one heart, might as well validate it, if you will. Or listen, let yourself feel. When I was a counselor for a while there, one of the things I talked with people the most is about not stopping anxiety. Well, I don't want to feel it. You're right, you don't, but you have to.
The only way out is through.
And I would talk about how anxiety is really good. Like, we should all feel anxiety when we step out the house. Not a 10, but a 2, right? There should be a level of anxiety when you step out the front door of your house. There should be a level of anxiety when you walk in the grocery store. Because if you didn't have it, that's a whole nother disorder altogether, right? And I had this one guy go, but I'm not scared of anything. And I said, well, I think we need to write that sentence down. And he wrote it down, and I said, you need to replace the word nothing with everything. And he goes, that's not true. I don't feel anxiety. And I was like, yes, you do. You feel
You're just constantly at a 10.
It's normal. Yeah. And that was one of the things, because we started talking about stuff, and like, he did start to expose things he was scared of, things he had, worries that he had, but it was his intellectual gymnastics of like, why worry is not anxiety. Okay, sure, let's talk about that. But we all need to feel it, and we don't let ourselves. Like, we all need to be depressed. When you go to a movie and the ending is not worth it to you, it's so anticlimactic. You didn't like that Black Widow died. Sorry to spoil that one for whoever didn't see that movie. But when she died, you should have felt a little bad. Like, you should have. When you walk out of a Marvel movie and go, what was that piece of shit? You should feel a little bad because you spent 15, 20 bucks on a movie that sucked. You should. And when people go, oh no, I got to go get some ice cream to feel better. No, fuck, sit in it. Talk about it. Let yourself have it. Because again, going back to that unique moment, that thing that makes us special. Other people felt bad when walking out of that movie, but you were the only you who felt bad when you walked out of that movie. That makes you absolutely special and unique in that given moment. We get lost in the idea that there's 8 billion people on the fucking planet.
That's a lot of snowflakes, you guys.
Yeah, like on the flip side of that, there are the people who find themselves to be so much of the exception and the weirdo. I got to remind them that there's 8 billion people on the planet.
Right.
And you're also not that special, right? On the flip side of that. But the emotion thing, I'm also getting back in my head because I was feeling very exposed. And I can recognize and I'll admit to it.
Thank you for naming that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I have to. Like, honest to God, one of my goals of doing the podcast is not because I feel like I can contribute to the autism community or even the autism conversation. I'm a jackass who lives in Massachusetts who likes to make jokes about shit. I introduce myself to people as being an asshole regularly just so they can write off shit I say. But one of the things that I want is not necessarily to contribute, but it's to connect. And not for me per se, but it's also because I know there's so many people that feel isolated even inside our community because they have points of view like me and they don't get to hear a lot of voices talk the way I do about certain things. They want to have a community that is not divisive against the NT world because there are people in that NT world that they love and that they respect. And they hope that that person would be able to understand them more. But then you hear people in our community say, well, they'll never understand you 100%. Fuck right. They didn't live your entire life. How about they understand 3%? Does that work? You know, enough where they can go, oh, you're having a moment. Not, oh my God, you might be on drugs. 3% is all we need to understand somebody else's existence. When people say to me, you can't understand my life because you're a white guy, I don't need to understand your whole life. I don't need to understand it as thoroughly as you do. But I need to understand enough of it so I can connect emotionally with it. And that's not a huge piece. We all have emotions. We all got pain. We all have moments where we felt like somebody treated us wrong because of our existence of some level. And that's all we really need. We don't need to understand somebody's life 40%. We need to understand enough so we emotionally know what that feels like. And I think we can all do that together. And again, I might just be the asshole spouting off at the mouth, but that's why I do it. That's why I do what I do, is just to connect with another human being. Because that's all we really need at the end of the day, right? Like, we just need to feel
as social creatures. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, the amount of fuckers who say autistic people aren't social. Bitch, you human. Yes, you are.
And there's great sadness in having written off the entire human race. Like, I don't fit in so sufficiently that I'm just going to isolate myself. I've been there for long stretches of time, and I'm like, no, actually. And without fail, small talk is poison, but big talk, like the conversation we've just been having, like I feel a lot more alive than I did when I rolled out of bed this morning. And I think
absolutely
that's a good reminder. It's a good reminder.
Absolutely. Oh, small talk. You brought up small talk. Yes, it sucks. But if you look at it from a functional point of view, 3 sentences to learn in life. Hi, my name is, insert name. How are you today? And what's been going on lately? And then immediately go into whatever the fuck you're thinking about. Those 3 sentences are all you really need to make the other person comfortable enough to talk about anything. And I say that with absolute confidence because I have trial and error the shit out of conversation.
You've scienced this.
Yeah.
It was so interesting. I had a work situation earlier this week, actually, where I showed up on this meeting and we did a brief moment of small talk, and then I crashed into like a bunch of critique and stuff I wanted to change and all that kind of stuff. And about halfway through that, I paused and was like, hey, I need you guys to understand that what we're talking about here is the last 15%. The first 85% of what you did was fucking amazing. This is like world class, world changing. Nobody else has done this before. We're spending 80% of this meeting on the 15% we need to improve, not because you're terrible, but because I want to make it even better. And that brief interlude changed everything. They were like, oh, then they were eager to listen and eager to, I was like, oh, I forgot to do the thing where I was like, guys, I'm really happy. I just want to make it even better. Being so in my brain and so nervous about giving the critique, I forgot that it's not about the critique, you know?
Something similar. And he's probably going to hate me that I'm going to say it this way, but I'm going to say it this way anyway. I've been actually teaching Steve over the last year to start with what he liked and then tell me what he don't. And I said, it's going to help with all of your relationships with people. Start with what you like, then tell me what you don't.
It's the shit sandwich.
Yes.
Make the buns tasty.
It's motivational interviewing 101. Actually, my parents raised me under that because it was part of Father Flanagan's Boys Town, which was based in the Midwest. It's compliment, criticism, compliment. Right? But you don't give the compliment or the criticism from I felt. No, it's you did. And then the criticism is I felt. Right? So it's the wording in that's real important. And so I've been talking to Steve about it, especially because Steve's a guy that when he gets comfortable enough with you, he will roast you. But that's his way of showing affection and love, right? So I have to put perspective on it, and I have to remember, no, that's Stevie's love language, right? But I've been talking to Steve about how, if you want to roast somebody, cool, but say something from here that is super validating to their existence, right? And the other day, no, not the other day. I'm sorry. I misworded. I'm sorry. I made it sound like it was longer ago than it was. Literally yesterday during the day, after his girlfriend, who's in the play with me, told him that I had something going on because people asked about what was up. He didn't ask me about if it was an episode. He didn't ask me what set it off. He said, "You okay?" First thing he said, "You okay?" And I responded with, "I'm fine." And he said, "No, are you okay?" And I went, "I'll be fine." And he goes, "Good. By the way, I heard you added more lines to my play." So in a way, he's learning in that regard, but I'm also learning to not read his text message. This is a horrible habit that I had with him, especially with him. I would read every text message as if it was criticism, negative, shitting on me, all of that. Fuck, man, there should be an app called Autistic Texting, and it immediately puts a plus sign or a negative sign over the comment just so we can interpret the tone a little better.
Plug it into ChatGPT and hey, what does this actually say?
Yeah, what tone is Steve talking to me in? So we actually had a blowout argument one day where we didn't talk to each other for weeks because he was trying to tell me he liked something I did on stage the night before, but the way it was worded, and of course the headspace I was in, I read it as, "Nick, you suck." Not at all what he meant, but then I went on the attack and picked that sentence apart and said, "Here's what you really meant by that," and blah, blah, blah. And then he came back at me because I came at him, and then back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, till I finally said, "Dude, I'm tired of your shit, fuck off." And his response was, "You're such a mean prick. You're not autistic. You're an asshole." And we didn't talk for weeks, right? And then when we came back together, because now we're going to talk on the phone, he said it out loud. I said my part out loud. And he went, "Oh, I thought you meant." And I went, "I thought you meant." And I like hearing the voice because I can interpret better. He has a hard time talking because he's got to think shit through and process and all that. And so our two dynamic is very weird in that because people see us in public and they think I'm making fun of him and picking on him all the time when they have no idea the shit he sends me. Somebody in the play actually said, "You keep saying all this shit against Steve. Are you guys even friends?" And I said, "I've said all of this to his face. Yes, he fixates on shit. Yes, he's hypercritical about how things go. but he's not really critical at all. And if you notice, every time I say something that you might perceive as criticism or bad against Steve or talking behind his back, I always follow it up with, we're best friends.
Yeah, you've kind of earned your bullshit together, and you know how the thing, totally. This was amazing. I'm psyched to have had you on the podcast. Thank you so much. And
well, thank you. I've been waiting for this.
I would be delighted to talk for hours more, but I've got to go and bring a kitten to a vet.
Yeah, and also you probably have a life that you need to get back to. It's not.
I wouldn't go that far. Brent, this was amazing. Thank you so much.
You've been trying for months to be on. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to Autistic FM. If this episode stirred something in you or just made you feel a little more seen, I'd love to hear about it. You can join the conversation at autistic.fm. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do that for as little as $5 a month. A huge thanks again to Nick from the On the Spectrum podcast for showing up with such honesty and heart. If you enjoyed this conversation, definitely check out their podcast as well. It's thoughtful, funny, and packed with real moments like the ones you saw in this podcast. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Haje Kamps, edited by Sean Portillo, with additional support from Crystal Cedeno. Whether you're new here or this is your 40th episode, thank you. It means the world that you're listening. Until next time, take care of yourself. We'll talk soon.